The low-end theory consistently appears in greatest albums of all time lists, with Rolling Stone ranking it 43rd in their comprehensive list. It's been referred to as the Sgt. Pepper of hip-hop thanks to its boundary-pushing production and sampling, sharp vocal performances, and an enduring legacy that continues to inspire a multitude of influential artists. A Tribe Called Quest formed in the 1980s, and by the time they released their first album, People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm, the group consisted of Q-Tip, Ali Shaheed Muhammad, Phife Dawg, and Jarobi White. They were one of a handful of New York-based hip-hop figures that formed Native Tongues, a musical collective that championed the vibrant hip-hop scene of New York, known for their Afrocentric lyrics, trailblazing use of sampling, and of jazz-inspired beats. Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, and Queen Latifah were some of the other noteworthy exponents. Their debut release garnered widespread acclaim and was hailed for its imaginative and experimental approach to hip-hop. The group were looking to ride the wave of interest by releasing their second album, The Low-End Theory, the following year, and already had fresh new ideas and experiments in mind. But there were some early worries from the Jive Records CEO, Barry Weiss.
But it was very different than the first album. It wasn't as left in some ways, and we were concerned that it was maybe going to miss the mark, that maybe they were trying to go too commercial, but it didn't have the artistic integrity that People's Instinctive Travels did. And we were fucking completely wrong.
Despite early label skepticism, The Low-End Theory was a critical, commercial, and cultural hit.
This thing is doing very well, has already sold over 500,000 copies. These folks are very, very popular.
The first noteworthy aspect of the album is its instrumentation. The Low-End Theory shines with its deliberate emphasis on bass frequencies, showcasing the group's intention to create a distinct and enduring sound. The production strikes a balance between fundamental hip-hop ideals and innovative sampling techniques, exemplifying A Tribe Called Quest's meticulous and purposeful approach to crafting their music. The album's sound engineer Bob Power discusses the process of creating that trademark sound on The Low-End Theory when asked about the spareness of the sound. Notes are defined by the spaces between the notes. A pitch is just a pitch. A note has a pitch and duration. You throw it out there, if it doesn't have relationship to anything else, it kind of doesn't mean anything. But in relation to the things around it, including the space, all of a sudden it has either rhythmic or melodic significance. I view mixing and sonics the same way. When you mix a record, there's two main things that are important. Musical balances, which are really important, and timbral and tonal balances. And in order to get the second one right, and actually the first one to some degree to make room for everybody, it's really good if the tonal and timbral qualities of the different instruments don't step on each other. After reading this quote from Power, I was interested in listening to other popular hip-hop albums that also came out in 1991 and compare them to The Low-End Theory, to see if I could hear this musical balance in Tribe's album that he talks about. It was tricky to compare timbres of productions between the artists, but I do believe that Tribe's record just sounded slicker and more progressive, looking forwards where the other albums were looking backwards. Here's a collage of some of the most popular tracks from other hip-hop albums coupled with a Low-End Theory cut, and you can make up your own mind.
Days on the boulevard I lended. We used to kick routines and the presence was fitting. It was I, the abstract, and me, the 5-footer.
Used to be hard, now you just went soft. First you was down with the AK, and now I see you on a video with me.
Well, what do you know? The D-Dog is first up to bat. No batteries included and no strings attached. No holds barred. No time for move faking.
Yellow fluid, check how I mellowly do it. Face to feet to this beat, you can tell I'm into it. As I'm pulling out my lance to kill you in advance to the winner's throne.
Stern, firm, and young with a laid-back tongue. The aim is to succeed and achieve at 21, just like Ringling Brothers. Our days and astound.
The Low-End Theory as a title has multiple meanings that reference the group's intention with the record. Low-end refers to the low end of the frequency spectrum where bass ranges appear. With that in mind, the album's title almost sounds like an academic thesis statement, highlighting that the record will be an exploration and celebration of low-end beats in hip-hop. With good quality headphones or speakers, you can definitely hear on tracks such as Butter how the bass drum and bass line dominate the sonic canvas.
Yeah, I messed around with the one called Flow. All the troopers round the way used to call her a hoe. But deep down in my heart, I knew that flow was good to go.
Low end also has another meaning, which Ali Shaheed Muhammad explains in this interview.
people might be familiar with the definition of the low-end theory. It's obviously about the low frequency. But the other is the fact that, people of color were on the lower end of the totem pole of America, and we're students of Public Enemy, students of BDP. And so for us musically, we wanted to make sure that we put that message into the music the best way that we could.
Yeah.
Another huge part of Tribe's sound, and certainly the thing that drew me to them initially, is their use of samples. The things that strike me about their samples is the deep and broad variety. Funk, soul, bebop, fusion, psychedelic rock, blues and hip-hop genres are all present throughout the album. Their ability to take a series of samples spanning different genres and time periods and configure them into something new and innovative is among the best in the industry. Angus Beattie for Quietus mentions, "The bass line from Minya's the Mooch by Jack DeJohnette's Directions, which to start with is an album track released on an experimental jazz label rather than a global radio staple, has been chopped up and reconstructed in a sequence so different even its makers might struggle to recognize it. It surely ought to be the more difficult track to listen to, less accessible, less direct, but the opposite is true. The bounce is infectious and the melody drilled into the music from the bass simply thrilling." And you can hear exactly what he means.
Mother's last creation, minds get flooded, ejaculation, right on the 2-inch tape, the abstract poet incognito.
Another great example is the infamous Date Rape, which lifts samples from jazz legend Cannonball Adderley and Jackson 5 star Jackie Jackson. Tribe were also very keen on including some live instrumentation in the album as well as the samples, so they recruited the likes of Ron Carter, the celebrated jazz double bassist, and vocalist Vinya Mojica to contribute to the record too. Beyond the music, there's a lot to be said about Q-Tip and Phife Dawg's vocal and lyrical performance, which helped the Low End Theory reach its legendary status. Individually, the two rappers have very different styles and tones. Q-Tip has a mellow voice with his bars being contemplative and philosophical. One of my favorites is,
"I must regroup my thoughts and kick the next verse for my people. Please don't be deceived by the ugly sights of evil. The world is kinda cold and the rhythm is my blanket."
Whereas Phife Dawg is higher pitched and a bit more comical and street, with bars like,
"Put New Balance sneakers to avoid a narrow path. Messing around with this against the size of the I never have step cause I'm not a half stepper."
Let's also not forget this classic Phife Dawg bar. Together, Q-Tip and Phife Dawg provide varied but balanced vocals for the record.
You had one voice that was like high, and then you had Tip who was like in the middle.
Tip is very smooth. Phife is very hype. The yin and yang of those two, that to me was the perfect marriage.
On their debut album, Phife Dawg only appeared on a couple of tracks, and it was somewhat by chance that he found himself with a more prominent role for the group's second release. He recounts that, "A couple of months before we started working on Low End, I just happened to run into Q-Tip on the train leaving from Queens going to Manhattan, and he was like, 'Yo, I'm about to start recording this album. I want you on a couple of songs, but you have to take it serious.' I took that into consideration along with the last couple of shows we did for that first album. I saw how fruitful things could get." In keeping with the values of the Native Tongues Collective, the lyrics often reference black pride and positivity, but going back to Ali Shaheed Muhammad's interview where he explains the socio-political and racial meaning behind the Low End Theory as a title, these themes are prevalent throughout the group's lyrics. Since its release, the Low End Theory has established a glowing legacy that's influenced a whole host of musicians, including Outkast, The Roots, Jay-Z, Kendrick Lamar, Dr. Dre, and so many more. It's been selected by the Library of Congress for preservation and the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Another great Angus Beattie quote summarizes the album's status. "The record became beloved of fundamentalist b-boys because it rooted itself firmly in the music's core, sonic, conceptual, lyrical, and artistic values, yet managed to increase the band's appeal to listeners who generally shunned rap for sonic or ideological reasons. Here was a group from a still outsider genre, uniting hardcore fans and curious outsiders by making music that worried more about integrity, commitment, creativity, and resolve than it did appealing to the mainstream."
ride, y'all.
Thanks so much for tuning in and watching till the end. If you're a Tribe Called Quest fan, please drop a comment below with your thoughts on the album and any other albums you'd like me to cover. And consider hitting like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you.